Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. I was going through some Star Wars comics the other day, specifically the Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith Burning Sea story arc. It's a comic that covers the occupation of Mon Cala by the Galactic Empire, and in one of the cooler scenes, a Jedi Master named Farron Barr is surrounded by a group of Inquisitors and Purge troopers. All seems lost until the Jedi triggers Order 66 somehow, and then the clones turn on the Inquisitors and begin shooting at them. It was a brilliant move on Farron Barr's part, but it also made me think, if Order 66 worked on the Inquisitors, then how come Anakin Skywalker wasn't blasted away by his clones immediately after Palpatine triggers Order 66? Well, first let's break down how exactly Order 66 worked and how Palpatine was able to implant these directives into the entire clone army. In an older video, we covered how the inhibitor chip worked. And I'll be honest, we didn't really figure out exactly how it works because I don't science well. But basically, upon birth, the Kaminoan clones implanted these biochips into the clones at a very early stage of their development, when they're basically a stage 3 embryo. These chips are inserted near the brain beneath the skull and must have been extraordinarily difficult to spot because there are very few incidents when medical officers actually were able to detect them. And even when these chips were detected, they were usually written off as benign tumors. And then when people started asking questions about these chips, the Kaminoan scientists oftentimes would just lie and say that the chips were put there to make the clones less independent and aggressive. Now, these chips are way beyond our own technology, so we don't really know how they work, but it seems to be attached to either the parietal lobe or the frontal lobe. The parietal lobe manages sensory and perception, whereas the frontal lobe controls our cognitive skills, two important parts of the brain that control how we move our body and why we move our body. The chips seem to put an individual in a trance-like state and creates a desire in the clones to follow a specific order. This actually reminds me more of mental conditioning rather than some kind of brain control device. With our current understanding of brain signals, it seems almost impossible to create a complex command to our brain like kill a Jedi. Because at that point, you still need the individual to retain some kind of thought process and creativity to carry out this order. It's not like the chip is jacking into the body and controlling the clone's movements like you would fly a remote-controlled drone. Instead, a clone must somehow identify what is a Jedi and then also figure out a way using the tools around them or skills that they have to kill that individual. So the chips are somehow able to implant some pretty complex ideas and at the same time allow the clones to retain some sense of self. And the chips didn't just have one order in them, they had 150 orders. This way it wouldn't really be suspicious if the chips were finally discovered. Originally, I was under the impression that Order 66 could only be triggered by certain authority figures. Here is the original text from Order 66. In the event of Jedi officers acting against the interests of the Republic and after receiving specific orders verified as coming directly from the Supreme Commander, JAR commanders will remove those officers by lethal force and command of the JAR will revert to the Supreme Commander until a new command structure is established. This is another level of coding that must be implanted into the chips. It means that the clones must recognize and verify either the voice or appearance of the Chancellor before triggering the order. It is possible that this part of Order 66 is not actually built into the chip itself. As we can see, Farron Barr is able to trigger Order 66 and he clearly wasn't the Chancellor. He was just a dirty old Jedi Master hiding in a sewer. What's also interesting here is that Barr is able to turn clones against Inquisitors who technically weren't even Jedi anymore. Well, they used to be Jedi, but now they were clearly working for the Empire. So depending on what kind of metrics the clones will use to judge an individual to see if whether they are a Jedi or not will determine how the clones perceive Anakin. Are the clones perhaps implanted with knowledge of every Jedi by using flash learning? Flash learning is how the clones were able to learn so much information within such a short time. Is it possible that the clones are exposed to a database which has a hologram or a picture of every Jedi in the order and a short description of who they are? This would allow them to be able to recognize any Jedi. Maybe from day one, Sidious or Dooku made sure that Anakin Skywalker's picture was also memorized and classified as someone the clones shouldn't attack. It would be a very long-term plan on Palpatine's part. It's also a big risk because there's no certainty that Anakin will turn, but Palpatine and Plagueis did technically create him, so it is possible that he was always a part of their overall plan. And that exemption might be the only reason why the clones didn't immediately gun down Anakin Skywalker. So from what we can tell, Order 66 needs a visual or verbal confirmation from the Chancellor, or maybe a Jedi who could mind trick his way to triggering the Order, which might be what Barr did. So another reason why Anakin is still alive is that Palpatine might have never sent Order 66 to his unit, the 501st. But wait, then why did the 501st slaughter all the Jedi at the Temple then? Well, technically the operation to take down the Jedi Temple was actually separate from Order 66. It was instead called Operation Nightfall. We're not really sure whether the clones were just following Operation Nightfall or also had Order 66 triggered. But it is possible that the 501st were manually given orders by Anakin Skywalker. But then how about all the other clones Anakin encounters that did have Order 66 triggered? Why didn't they just shoot him down? Well, the explanation there would be that Anakin never encountered any Order 66 clones until after he transitioned to Darth Vader. And at the time he was Darth Vader, none of the clones could recognize him. If you look at the Inquisitors who the Purge troopers attacked, they did wear helmets and physically change their appearances, but you could still see most of their faces, so they were recognizable. So I guess a Jedi could technically disguise themselves by wearing a full suit of armor and a full face helmet. There were, of course, the shock troopers that escorted Anakin's burnt body to the medical facilities on Coruscant, and they definitely had Order 66 triggered, but they didn't attack Anakin. Is that because Palpatine had carefully redacted that order? Is it even possible to turn around Order 66 once it's deployed? Or maybe the clones detect the Jedi by using a variety of other factors they can observe with their eyes. There are certain things that only Jedi can do, like use force powers. They enhance their own abilities and even move objects around. They also use lightsabers and wore cloaks. Maybe the 501st, despite knowing that Order 66 was activated, observed that Anakin was no longer a Jedi. Either he verbally told them, or they were told by the Chancellor. But then again, there's the fact that the Purge troopers turned against the Inquisitors and tried to kill them, even though they had clearly left the Order. Plus, if we were using force powers and lightsabers as a factor for identifying a Jedi, then most likely the Sith would also fall into that category as well. Although Palpatine did have extra protection because the clones probably identified him as the Chancellor before they would a Force user. Anyway, those are some of my theories on why Anakin Skywalker wasn't just immediately shot in the back by the 501st. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, guys, thanks for joining us. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.